But yeah, I would say dare to be bold. Usually we don't regret those. Usually we don't regret those moments there.
Welcome to Unleash Your True Value, a Breaking Money Silence podcast where professional women flip the script on self-doubt, ditch the discount mindset, and start owning their worth like the rock stars they are. Each episode is packed with real talk, practical tips, and the occasional mic drop to help you charge what you're worth and earn what you truly deserve. So buckle up, grab your coffee, because it's time to unleash your true value and make some noise while you're at it. Now, here's your host, Kathleen Burns Kingsbury.
Hello, and welcome to the Unleash Your True Value podcast. I'm so excited to have my guest today, Ashley Kwame. Am I saying that correctly?
You are.
Excellent. I get an A+ already, Ashley. So let me tell people a little bit about you and a little bit about how we met. And then we're going to delve into a conversation about the value that you provide and the journey that you've had as a woman in finance. So Ashley is an owner of Beyond the Plan. I love this concept. It's a consulting practice that partners with advisory firms to provide fractional financial behavior officer services. Brilliant. As an FBO, Ashley serves as an in-house subject matter expert on financial psychology, therapy, and communication engagement. In addition to her work with advisory firms, she's also a podcast host like I am, and her podcast is called Planning and Beyond. It's a podcast that explores the fascinating intersection of financial planning and the human understanding, bringing fresh insights to both advisors and clients alike. I think if you know me and you've listened to my podcast before, you know why I'm having Ashley on. But welcome, Ashley, to the podcast. I'm really thrilled to break money silence with you today.
Thanks, Kathleen. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So Ashley and I have been circling around each other in the industry, probably, the social media, LinkedIn thing. And each of us have been appreciating each other. And finally, I don't know how it ended up happening, but we connected and had a great conversation. And I said, you need to come on because my listeners need to benefit from this conversation as well. So I know why you're passionate about what you do, but can you tell us a little bit about, first of all, what a fractional behavioral financial officer does, and also why you're passionate about it?
Yeah, it's a great question. As far as what that does, just to expand a little bit kind of on what you shared, it is that in-house trusted, we say subject matter expert, right? But it's really just that in-house, trusted team member that advisors, the team, clients can go to, can lean on to explore any kind of non-numbers types of issues, right? I'm not the technical expert here for a lot of reasons, but what I help clients do and simultaneously advisors is to really help to deepen just the understanding of why the client, or maybe the advisor in some cases, why do they think, feel, do? That's kind of my little tagline slogan is think, feel, do. So helping advisors, at least in the client context, understand what is below the waters, what's below the surface, why are they making the financial decisions that they are making or not making, maybe in some cases, but also what is dynamically maybe going on between partners in a coupleship or in a family dynamic situation, if you have multiple or a multi-generational family type of engagement, what are all of the things that are going on below the waters, below the surface that help inform the planning process, the financial suggestions, recommendations, but also maybe in some cases to help keep clients moving forward, to get them unstuck there. So I'll pause. I know that's kind of a mouthful. That's a lot, right, to kind of throw out there. But that is essentially, I say essentially, but that is some of the framework, at least, of the work that I do, or the role that I serve, I should say, within firms.
So let me jump in real quick before we talk about why you're passionate about doing this. I have to say that when I started in this field around financial psychology, 2007, 8, 9, one of the things that people were trying to figure out is how do you bring, say, a financial therapist or somebody who's a financial coach into the advisory practice? And so I think it's so brilliant when you flash forward to now that you've figured out how to do it in a way that's really meaningful, in a way that's helpful to clients, but also helpful to advisors. And so I feel as if you are an innovator in that space and have, maybe there's some other folks with you, but you're certainly taking the lead. So it's really nice to see that you've figured out part of that puzzle that in 2008 and 9 was nowhere near. We couldn't find the pieces to fit together, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you guys certainly laid the foundation, I feel like, for, maybe people like me to be able to do this. So, innovator feels like a very strong word. Most days I feel like I'm kind of crazy
Oh,
to
take it in, Ashley.
take on kind of this kind of work. But to answer, I guess, your question as far as why am I passionate about it, my husband, he is a CFP, a partner at a local firm here. So I've had familiarity with financial planners and practices, obviously, through being married to him for the last 17 years. So there's been just kind of this, on or working in similar ways. So I guess I should say, so prior to this work 2 to 3 years ago, I'm licensed as a marriage and family therapist, and I come from the mental health space. That's my home discipline, and had a private practice for at least roughly 10 of those kind of 15 years, focusing really on couples and families. And, you know, shockingly, finances come up within that work and within that space. But, my husband and I, there's just been this, we've just kind of been circling kind of around each other, right? I think of like a Venn diagram, there's his work, there's my work. There's a lot of overlap between what he and I do. The passion, I guess, really comes out of a place from burnout within working in mental health, truth be told. So
It's hard. It's hard.
it is
Did 15 years. I loved the work that I did, but it's a burnout situation.
very much, yeah, very much so. And, if I'm honest, there was always a part of me when I left grad school, I knew that I wanted to have my own private practice, focusing on couples. I knew that like out the gate, but I also knew I'm the type of person that's like okay, well, what else? And I don't know if I ever really saw myself just doing couples therapy for, 30 years, 40 years, however long that career was. But it did get to a point, right around COVID, just before COVID, where I was really starting to experience, a lot of just burnout symptoms, and really craving something that was different and that was exciting. So that passion for the work that I do now, it came from a place really of needing something more fulfilling and meaningful, more purpose, I guess, but also needing needing to take care of myself too. And
You giggle,
it,
but it's so important. I think I have therapist friends who have been doing it 30, 40 years and they take care of themselves and they thrive. And, not to over identify with your story, but after about 12 years, I just felt as if there was a part of me that wasn't getting to be creative and innovative and all the things that I think we possibly share. Plus, I had a big business side. And so I can completely identify with the idea of you're doing really important work. It's hard work, but there also feels like somehow there's something else.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And feeling too, and this, right, from, working kind of in this space, just so many restrictions on
Mhm.
how I could best serve clients. And while I can appreciate, those restrictions, so specifically, talking about like HIPAA, state licensure laws, like I can appreciate that. But things were just starting to get to a point where those restrictions, more specifically around just kind of the insurance piece, like where they were really impacting my ability to serve couples or serve my clients
Mhm.
in a way that professionally I felt was right, or how it should be done. And after a while, I just kind of got tired of like I can't practice the way that I want. I can't serve clients the way that I want. I can't help them the way that I want. And, a lot of other stuff, right? Kind of brewing, I think maybe
Yep.
for me below the waters. And yeah, I found financial therapy, the Financial Therapy Association. That led to going back to Kansas State and pursuing that graduate certificate. And really from there, Kathleen, like the ball just kind of quickly rolled.
Yeah.
Not downhill in a way that things went bad, but just downhill in a way of like changing the trajectory
Right.
of my business and the work that I do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I see you light up when you say that. So you've done your own work, you're doing work with advisors and with clients. So one of the things that I'm always curious about is kind of what were the money messages that you got growing up about either running your business or your value? Like when you think back, what were some of those fundamental messages and how do they impact you today?
Yeah, the one that resonated with me the most was from my dad. My dad is a CPA. My birthday is also April 15th. So
That's so awesome.
awesome. And like, I don't know. I'm like, maybe that was the start of some trauma for me, or maybe that was the start of like the path. Like, maybe this is where I should have always been. Kathleen is in the financial services space. Like,
No, no,
that's
I
how my
think you
story kind of
right.
started.
That's okay. I actually think when we take different paths to get here, it makes it much more interesting. Even though now that you're on
For
the other
sure.
side, I can say that. I'm sure if I said that during the pandemic, you would be like, I don't want to hear it.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. But some of the money messages really came from my dad, or the main one that resonated with me. And I remember him always saying, like, go out and work for yourself. Be your own boss, go out and work for yourself. And I saw my dad go through, job changes, changing firms, the impact between he and my mom, the impact on him, my brother, and I would remember him saying, like, work for yourself, go out and work for yourself. And that's, I mean, I did that, like, as quickly as possible.
Mhm.
Like, that was kind of my main focus from a money, other, I guess, maybe just kind of money messages, that I received. Some of them around just generosity and giving back, helping out others. My granddad, my mom's father, like always would give my brother and I what he called Happy Meal money. And, it's a few dollars here and there, but even like through college and even now, like he will give, myself or like my kids like Happy Meal money. So just that idea of like just being generous with others financially have really just stuck and resonated with me.
Interesting. Those are two very nice messages or helpful messages. I'm curious because you came from the mental health world, although you were raised by somebody who was in the finance world, married to someone in the finance world. So I'm curious about the messages you got about compensation. And
Ooh.
because very different in mental health as to what being paid well is compared to what being paid well in the financial services space.
Yeah. In terms of just maybe like overt kind of, messages, I don't recall like any direct messages like being, kind of said there around just compensation. However, what I will say though is there was conversation between my mom and dad. My dad was the breadwinner. My mom, she had a few different jobs. She worked for Coca-Cola at one point. I remember early on, she went and worked inside the school system as a secretary, and then she went to work as a bank teller. That may have been late high school, right when I went off to college there. But there was always, it was just, this sense maybe of, that men out earn, like men should be like the
Mhm.
breadwinner. There's just this gender, right, kind of dynamic there. And so, in terms of just like a messaging, I know that I have struggled within that arena with my husband and I. Not that Clayton does anything like wrong,
Yeah.
but there's this almost, it's not subconscious because I'm very conscious of it, but there's almost like this little like part of me that feels this like competitive piece of like, I need to keep up with you and I need to make, a certain amount or as much, right, in order to maybe have like value there or in that relationship. And look, this is all my own stuff. Like none of this is perpetuated within our marriage. Like Clayton, is very clear, like, you are not, I don't see you that way or our dynamic that way. But there is just this part of me of like from a place of me being valued as a partner that I need to earn or make like, at least a certain dollar amount.
I can identify with that because my husband's an engineer, not your typical engineer. He's very social and outgoing, so he's kind of confusing in a wonderful way.
Yeah.
Uh, and when I switched businesses, and so the first year is usually not profitable. And I just remember feeling very much like I couldn't buy anything, and not from him at all, for me, to the point where, like, a brush for the toilet to clean it, I felt like I had to buy the cheapest one, all in my own head. When I started KBK Wealth Connection and I was able to, bring in my first contract, I can remember very vividly being at, I believe it was a Pier 1, being at Pier 1. We were buying something. I think it was a desk or something. I don't remember that part. But what I remember on the way out is I was like, I like that coat rack. I'm getting that coat rack. And my husband just looked at me because I had never expressed an interest in a coat rack. And he's like, we don't need that. And I was like, no, I'm buying that coat rack. And to this day, that coat rack really represents of like, I'm back. And
Yeah.
again, maybe because of messages I received about value, but it is kind of interesting that for women, and I think when we're talking about unleashing our true value, there's a lot there to unpack because of these subtle or not so subtle messages about what women's place is around money, how much we should make, if we should make more or less or the same, or be profit motivated. It's really kind of interesting to me. So to switch a little bit to talk about, like, how do you work with advisors to help them understand their clients more and help them? I mean, I think it's twofold. One of it is helping them understand their clients more, but I also think, because my term innovator or a newer service in financial services, like, how do you communicate your value and convince these advisors that, hey, you need a chief behavioral officer?
Yeah, that I'll answer the last part first, with that's a great question, and that is why I've hired somebody from a marketing standpoint to help me do that because I've struggled, truth be told, right? It's one of those things where I know, like, deep within, like, every part of me that
Yeah.
this is valuable, and I have no idea how to, at least I've not previously had an idea of like, how do I explain this in such a way that makes sense? Because I can talk like the clinical jargon, game. And like, if I were to explain it to you, right, like in quote unquote clinical, right, like
Yeah.
terms
Former
using that,
therapists. Yeah.
it would make sense, right? But I've struggled just with how do I communicate and articulate this in a way that is going to resonate. And so, yeah, I've hired somebody to help me do that. And she's been wonderful. But in terms of how do I, help clients like understand their clients, there's a few tools, practical tools, right, that I use. There are a few assessments within data points that, I like to
Mhm.
take clients through or will take clients through when appropriate. I have been kind of, I would say, developing. I don't want to say developed because that feels final, but developing, several other just tools that help us to go below the waters and suss out what are those beliefs, what are those attitudes, what are those, thoughts around identity, like who am I as a person, and how has that come to inform, whatever the conversation is about there. And the four kind of components that I am always just, either thinking about, asking about, the lens that I'm looking through, the four components are identity, thoughts, feelings, and actions. And so I'm constantly trying to kind of, understand what those parts are through a lot of different ways and methods. And the firms that I work for, those advisors, I would say, are highly emotionally
Yeah.
intelligent just already. So some of it is me communicating maybe patterns or just other like insights. But truth be told, Kathleen, like sometimes like they'll like say something that I'm like, yeah, dang, like that was like really insightful. I hadn't thought about it that way. Like you're right, you know?
Well, that's the
Um,
beauty of a team, right?
it
Coming from
is.
different perspectives and different trainings, but different perspectives, it can be so useful.
For
So, yes.
sure. Yeah. So sometimes, I don't, it is helping for sure. But some of it is really, I probably would use the word collaboration. It's just, as you said, it's more of a collaborative, effort to understand who this person, really is and, or the couple and why are we having this conversation now? What are we trying to, accomplish there?
Now, I see the value, and I know other advisors that I know see the value in what you're providing. It may be that it's a work in progress, but I'm wondering, is there or was there a point where you thought, no, this is really valuable. What I'm providing is valuable and you could stand in it? Or is that something that you're kind of working on unleashing over time?
No, I will say that I've been standing in it now for almost 2 years. Some of that came, I talked about just kind of feeling like burned out and like that like journey, but I remember I went to the Shift conference
Oh, yeah.
in
Just so people know, the
2023.
SHIFT conference is a behavioral finance conference that was newly started, and I'm jealous that you were there, but carry on.
Yeah, it in 2020 2023, and, I had some, kind of was percolating on some thoughts around what does it look like for me to work with firms? Like, what does that work look like? And I already, had been, thinking about, kind of that, but I left that conference and I vividly remember sitting on the plane next to Clayton and, somewhere in the conference, I had heard the term fractional. Now, I'd heard that terminology like before, but just, hadn't clicked on it. So I knew what fractional type work was. But I was sitting on the plane next to Clayton and I was like, I think I want to be a fractional, therapist, like team member inside of firms. I was like, that's what I want to do. I said, and I'm going to figure out what that looks like. But I absolutely believe in this like so much. And, that was March, April of 2023. And by July of that same year, I had my first firm,
I
sign
love
up.
that. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah.
I find that more often than not, the women that I interview have these distinct moments where they're like, something clicks. And sitting there in that plane after that conference, and I'm sure a bunch of other things leading up to it,
Sure.
something clicked.
Yeah, a lot of things clicked. And, from there, it just, you talk about passion. I is maybe slightly dramatic, but like I have not stopped thinking about that role. What does that work look like? How can I do this? How can I figure this out?
Yep.
And like you said, there are others out there that, serve as an in-house, maybe financial psychologist, or, there's a lot of different expressions, but I was going to figure this out for the smaller, maybe more boutique kind of firms. Like how do I offer services to them, right? Not the big, large, kind of
Right.
corporation right there, but how do I offer services to them? I'm gonna figure out what this role looks like and is, and I'm gonna do it. And so
And gosh darn it, you are.
and gosh darn it, I am. Yeah, yeah.
So you've been standing in your value for a while now. And so I'm curious, and I ask everybody this question, like, what's the craziest thing you've ever done to land a gig, land a job?
Ooh, that is a great question. So when I graduated graduate school, my husband Clayton, he had commissioned as an Army officer,
Mhm.
and he was the 2 years I was at grad school. We got married right out of college. I went immediately to grad school. He immediately commissioned and then left for South Korea. He was stationed there. So we were separated the first 2 years. After graduate school, I moved to Korea to be with him for
Yep.
18 months. And, post graduation, I needed to get hours for licensure.
Oh,
Like I
right.
was
Yeah.
like, I need to get my like clinical hours. I need to do this. And I think 48 hours I'd landed was in country, 48 hours was in our apartment. By 48 hours, I was like, I can't do this. Like, I can't just sit in an apartment and like decorate it in walk out and like explore like the city. Like this isn't me. And the next day I was in what they call kind of the alcohol substance abuse,
Mhm.
department there. I was in there asking like, can I volunteer? Can I work here? Like, how does this work? And they're like, no, like, no, like this is a government job. You don't just like come in and just say, hey, like this is who I am. Like, can I just work here? And I was like, okay, well, can I just like be here and around you like for free? Like, you don't have to pay me, but can I just like be here? I need to get hours. And
Yeah.
they all understood that, And so one of the women is much older, clinical social worker. Her name was Brenda. And I don't know if she felt bad for me. I'm not sure, but she just, yeah, and kind of took me under her wing. And, I volunteered there for a few months and that ended up I landed a full-time paid actual job somewhere in
That
another
is
another
great.
department. But I still to this day, like I remember their faces like looking at me just like, you really don't get how this process works. So
Well, and what strikes me about that story, Ashley, is that that's the entrepreneurial part of you. That's like, I'm going to go just do it. Like,
yeah.
I'm just doing it. Doesn't matter if it's been done before. I just
Yeah.
love that,
Yeah.
especially foreign country. Like
Oh,
the
yeah. I
whole,
mean, we're on a military base, it's all
yeah.
Americans, but even still, I was 24 at the time. Like, here's this young 24-year-old kind of bebopping in, like, I want to work here. And,
Yeah.
can I get a job? Like,
That's great. So we've talked a lot about, what you do for a living, but also your value and finding your value for the people who are listening in. So these are professional women, advisors that serve them. What advice, if you could give one tip, what advice would you have on being able to kind of, I guess, find your value or communicate your value?
yeah, I would say find the things that keep you stuck from moving forward with maybe it's communicating your value, maybe it's living more aligned, right? Or authentically with how or who you see yourself to be. But take some time to figure that out. Doesn't have to be through therapy, can be through coaching, or what have you. But, I've really found that not only for myself, but clients, what have you, those that take the time to slow down and tune in and really figure out some of that, they end up making decisions that, to the best of my knowledge, most of them don't ever regret, but just offer just so much just reward, satisfaction, also relief, too, from feeling, I don't want to say burdened, but maybe chained by expectations, or other previous messaging there. So yeah, take some time to work on yourself, figure out who you are.
I love that because part of it, being stuck, sometimes we can get into this mode of like, woe is me, I'm stuck, as opposed to slowing down and being like, okay, what role do I play in my stuckness?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, excellent. Finish this sentence. Dare to be blank.
Okay. Well, Brene Brown's, the dare to lead kind of comes up. So I was thinking like dare to be a leader there, but that's the book. That's not really fair. That's,
From your
that's from,
heart, dare to be
right. I
what?
know. Yeah. I would say bold. I feel like there have been a lot of moments in my life where I have been bold, either with myself, like I'm going to figure this out, right?
Yeah.
Or at the office in Korea of the substance abuse, clinic there, and saying I want to work here. But yeah, I would say dare to be bold. Usually, we don't regret those. Usually, we don't regret those moments there.
Awesome. Excellent. So, where can people find out more about you and your work? And I know I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation, and I'm sure people will want to continue the conversation with you as well.
Yeah, I hang out on LinkedIn. So there's a few Ashley Kwamis. I think I'm the only one that works in financial services as the work that I do. But you can connect with me there. I like to hang out there. The Planning and Beyond podcast, you can check that out. Interact with me there. Send me a message through the podcast. Let me know what you like. Yeah, I would say those two places are great. Otherwise, I think there's links to other resources and other places you can find me on all of those places.
Excellent. Well, it has been a joy to break money silence with you. And I hope this is the beginning of many conversations because it's been fun for me to get to know you a little bit better. All of the links will be in the show notes for anybody who is interested in connecting more with Ashley. And just remember, dare to be bold, right?
Yeah, there we go.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Unleash Your True Value. I hope you're feeling inspired, empowered, and ready to own your worth unapologetically. Remember, your value isn't up for negotiation. It's time to embrace it, amplify it, and let the world know exactly what you bring to the table. If you're ready to take things even further, you don't have to do it alone. As a money mindset and business coach, Kathleen specializes in helping professional women like you rewrite their money stories, step fully into their power, and take their businesses to the next level. Visit kbkwealthconnection.com to set up a free coaching discovery call. Thank you for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe, share this episode with someone who needs to hear it, and leave us a 5-star review. Until next time, ditch that discount mindset and unleash your true value like the rock star you are.